he has agreed to join us today. So Jason, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Yeah, it's great to be here, and thank you for the invite. Always like, I guess, the industry's been very good to me. It's treated me very well, and I always like to give back wherever I can, and sort of send the elevator back down, and
Thank you.
share what I've learned and what I know, and very happy to be here. So thank you.
Really appreciate it. So why don't we just kick off? Do you want to just give us a little bit of your I guess your background, how you came to sort of get to do what you're doing now, and just tell us a little bit about your role so you're at what are you?
Moustache Republic.
Moustache Republic.
Yes.
I love it.
Cool.
So tell us a little bit about you.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. So I've been in digital for nearly 20 years with a special focus on e-commerce. During that time, I originally started out working for an e-commerce agency in Christchurch in the South Island. It was a weird situation of how I even came to work in digital initially. I had a friend who had another friend who was actually American as well. He owned a digital agency in Christchurch. This mutual friend, she introduced us together, and he was like, I knew already that digital and e-commerce were becoming the thing, and I could see the writing on the wall even back as early as even when I graduated from high school. I'm dating myself now, but I graduated from high school in '92, and I could even see then and earlier that e-commerce and digital were going to become really massive in the internet, because I lived through a period where there was no internet, all the way to shit internet, all the way through to really good and sort of global internet. And so to watch that transition happen, you could see the writing on the wall that this was going to be a really, really big deal. From a communications platform to a commerce platform, the internet was going to do it all. And so I kind of always knew that right from the early days, and I knew that I would probably get involved somehow, but I just didn't know how. And so through this mutual friend, I was introduced to an agency owner. This was back in the days when everything to do with digital and e-commerce was bloody hard. Everything was hard. Everything was bespoke. Everything was custom built. Most of the platforms on the market were really immature, pretty shit, and just everything. Most e-commerce sites were bespoke builds. A lot of them were built in Flash. There was a lot of that was the very early days when kind of everything to do with the internet was very cowboy, because there weren't established ways of doing hardly anything yet. And then Google kind of came along, and they became the one ring to rule them all to a degree, and unified the internet in a way, and kind of drove standardization of the internet in ways that no other brand and no other platform had done before. And so I was lucky to be on the very, very early period during that time, and working with that agency. And then while I was working for that agency, I thought, hey, I'm helping all these businesses sort of become e-commerce enabled. Why don't I do my own thing? Because I can take kind of what I know and what I've learned and run my own business, as well as, you get better experience when you're actually doing something. And so, instead of just talking about it and talking about the theory of it and doing it on behalf of other businesses, why not start my own from scratch? And one of my good friends wanted to get into it as well. So we basically started a side hustle. He was in IT and electronics procurement, in a full-time job, paid very well. I was working agency side, working full-time. And so we decided to start a side hustle. And so we started an e-commerce pure play, selling flash memory cards online. And that was at a time when, a 32 megabyte memory card was like $650. So, memory was very expensive in New Zealand at that time. And in fact, in Australia as well, memory was very expensive for like your digital cameras, your compact flash cards, your smart media cards, your memory sticks. That was all very expensive at the time. And there was no one in our market kind of doing discounting, direct importing, warehousing locally, and distributing kind of D2C. There was no one doing that in our market. It was all sold through the major retailers as bundles with cameras. And so we saw an opportunity, we saw a niche opportunity to start an e-commerce pure play selling just flash memory cards and some other accessories as well. And we just did that as a side hustle. We ran it from home offices. My business partner basically converted one entire bedroom of his house to a warehouse. And we started importing, and he was packed with cartons from floor to ceiling in his house. And he would get, so I was responsible for all of the tech, and I was responsible for all of the digital marketing, and I was responsible for the go-to-market strategy from a digital perspective. And then I had a programmer that I was working with at the time to build everything for us. And he was responsible for procurement and fulfillment, basically. So he would get home, race home from work, he would pack everything up, and then he would ship everything out at the end of the day. And after 6 months of doing that, we had grown so fast that one of us needed to quit our full-time job to help run this business full-time, still working from home. And then another 6 months after that, we'd grown again, and both of us needed to work in the business full-time. We got an office and small warehouse in Christchurch, and it grew from there. And so we did that for about over 7 years, and then we sold that business, exited that business, and then I went back and worked in an agency again, an agency up here in Auckland. We'd moved the business to Auckland, so I was based in Auckland. I went to work for an e-commerce agency here in Auckland. They were Magento Gold partners, so I was right in the thick of it when Magento was really just exploding onto the scene as an e-commerce platform. And so I did that for over 5 years. And then I most recently, before Moustache, I went back and I worked merchant side with New Zealand's largest online retailer of natural health products, HealthPost, and ran e-commerce operations for them, and pretty much ran all digital ops for them. And during the span of over 3.5 years, we replatformed every single technology that the business used, from back office, ERP, CRM, marketing automation, product information management platform. On the back end, replatformed all of that. And then on the front end, replatformed e-commerce to new e-commerce platform and all the supporting technologies, site search, loyalty, omni-channel integration with retail and vend, pause, and just everything else. So, and personalization on the front end of the website as well. We implemented new personalization technology and marketing automation technology. So, and that was my most recent role. Moustache was actually our partner, delivering all that work. And I'm very, very good friends, and have been for many years, with Tony from Moustache Republic, the founder. And so when I finished that kind of program of work that I had set out to deliver for HealthPost at that time, it was like, what do I want to do next? And, agency life is super stressful, but it's super amazing. And you get exposed to so many different business models, go-to-market models, B2C, B2B, D2C. And so, now basically I'm our director of solutions at Moustache, which basically means from the point where we engage with a client, I'll lead all of sort of the client discovery side of the business, and all of the solutioning and documentation around our solutions that we deliver for our clients. So we're a technical agency. We're not a marketing agency. We don't do digital marketing, but we live at the intersect basically between marketing, business, and tech. And so we engineer full omni-channel solutions, working with obviously across all of their digital sales and marketing channels and all of the technologies that supports those engagements with their customers. So that's really what we do. And we do design as well, obviously for the web portion of that. So, yeah, we have 45 people on our team, so we're not a huge agency, but we're not tight. We're probably now slightly bigger than a boutique agency, but we're not massive. We're not a publicist. So that's kind of where I'm at and what my background is, and hopefully that gives you a little bit of a foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, I kind of relate. I also graduated high school in 92. So I can very much relate to kind of seeing the evolution of the internet and getting email for the first time. And, I was working in the record industry, and, seeing stores fax through their orders to us and keying those orders into platforms, and sort of seeing that kind of evolve has been awesome. Yes. Especially from a marketing perspective as well. So just when you were talking about the business that you had with the memory cards, so what year was that, and how do you think you got that traffic, and why do you think it was so successful kind of back then? How were people finding you?
Look, I think we recognized, I think first off, we recognized that, well, the genesis of the business really came about because we recognized a gap in the market. So this is back in 2003. So this is still pretty early days from I guess an internet and e-commerce perspective. E-commerce was certainly it wasn't brand new. It had been going on in one form or another since sort of the mid 80s, but certainly it was still pretty nascent, and the acceptance of e-commerce was still growing. It was still in its infancy, and people were wondering, are you just going to scam me and steal my credit card details and rip me off? There was a lot of that sort of thinking going on at the time. And so the first thing that we did was we identified what we believed was a very clear market niche that was being heavily underserved, not just underserved online, but underserved full stop across the entire market, including at physical retail. So we saw a market that really was being held hostage by exceptionally egregious margins by the major retailers. And we said we can change this. We can, by sourcing directly overseas, we were doing both a combination of buying directly off of manufacturers as well as parallel importing off of major international retailers that were selling at prices, at sometimes 50% less than New Zealand. So we were very creative about how we sourced our product. And so we just looked at the market and we said, this is something that, my business partner, being in electronics sourcing, and that him being his career, he felt like he could make that happen in a very seamless way for us. And then obviously from a digital perspective, because I was working agency side, that felt like a good fit. So operations, sourcing, finance, business partner. So we had some overlapping skills, but we had very distinctive skills. And so we basically brought our skills, combined them together, and built an online business on the back of that. And that's what a lot of online businesses do. They take multiple skill sets, they form a bit of a cooperative, and away they go. I think the reason why we were successful is, one, there was a big gap in the market, but two, this was at a time when buying traffic was still very cheap. So, for most of our keywords if we look at AdWords, for example, we were very, very early in the AdWords game, and the vast majority of our keywords were 5 cents a click. That was very common. If you got up to 8 or 9 or 10 cents a click, you were in an expensive category. That's obviously ridiculous to think of now, but that was the reality at the time. And so, customer acquisition was cheap. Retention, conversion, all those things was still important, but acquiring new traffic was so inexpensive, and the demand online there was so many gaps in the market that setting up a new business where there was very little competition and acquiring traffic very cheaply was the name of the game in the very beginning of this whole e-commerce thing. Now, obviously, that's no longer the case. And so therefore, there's a bigger emphasis, or at least there should be a bigger emphasis on conversion and retention and remarketing now than just straight traffic acquisition, because acquiring traffic is expensive. Regardless of whether it's organic through SEO, which is a process and takes time and takes investment over longer periods of time, or you straight out buying traffic through AdWords or other pay-per-click platforms, or social media paid marketing, or whatever paid traffic you're driving from whatever channel, that is now more expensive. So CAC, customer acquisition costs, are through the roof. And so therefore, you back then, you didn't have to have such a massive cash runway to bridge the gap from the time where you launched and you were brand new and you were basically the equivalent of a billboard sitting between two buildings that were 3 inches apart on the internet. You didn't have to have as much of a cash buffer to get you to critical mass of building a brand online to acquire traffic, because acquiring traffic was inexpensive. Nowadays, it's probably easier from a technical perspective to get online and get transacting, but it's much, much more competitive and much harder to be successful at it and build a successful business on the back of it. And I think that's the difference that I've seen. That's the evolution I've watched for the last 20 years, go from it being fucking hard to get online and become transactional, but pretty easy to acquire traffic and build a brand, to now being super easy and cheap to get online, relatively speaking, but super hard to build a successful brand.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I've heard Gary Vaynerchuk talk about that a lot in terms of his wine business and how he was kind of at the right place at the right time, and using Google Ads to acquire all that, all that traffic,
Mhm.
and became very successful. And I think he did a talk a few years ago about how kind of the new kind of traffic drivers like Facebook and those sorts of platforms where the clicks were cheaper. He was like, jump on this now because it's not going to be like this forever.
Yeah.
So some really good points in there. I think definitely, I'd love to hear about, you sort of touched on it a little bit about how now it's, it is harder to kind of drive that traffic, but there's a big emphasis on conversions and once you've kind of got the traffic, we talked about this, I think, in a couple of sessions ago, just in regards to personalization, and that the expectations of customers today is so much higher than it used to be.
Yes.
And that's what you do, right? You build seamless experiences so that the customer, from the point that they sort of come to the client and they transact, and then all the stuff that happens during the transaction and afterwards. So in terms of, I guess, like customer expectations, like, do you want to talk a little bit just about that and how you've kind of, where you think that is at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. Customer expectations are higher than ever before. It used to be that if you whacked up an e-commerce website, loaded up a few products, a couple of images, didn't really need to have video, didn't really need to have a brand. If you were an aggregator retailer, so you were reselling someone else's products online, just the fact that you were online was a differentiator enough. Even up to 10 years ago, that was probably the case. Where being online and having an online offering of something that someone previously could maybe only ever get offline in physical retail, that was a game changer in and of itself. Nowadays, you can purchase just about anything you want online from someone somewhere in the world, and have it shipped directly to your door. So that in and of itself is no longer the differentiator. The differentiator is the channel mix. So where you're represented, where your potential target customers are, where they're living their daily lives, and how you can seamlessly weave your brand in front of them and start a brand dialogue with them in those channels natively. Perspective, this paid acquisition is still very important. Don't get me wrong, and especially if you're a brand new brand, and you're launching online for the first time. But the key difference is that now, because retail aggregators, I believe in the long term, so we're talking 10 to 15 years from now, most retail aggregators online are going to die. They're going to go away. And when I say retail aggregators, I mean people that are just reselling someone else's products. Someone else who manufactures the products, they get them in and they either send the orders off to the manufacturer to drop ship, or they send them off to a 3PL to drop ship for them, or whatever the case may be. So I think that model is a dying model, because the internet completely removes, the internet is the department store. The internet is the arbitrage between manufacturer and the end customer. So anything else that gets in the way between the manufacturer and the end customer is just a layer of margin that the internet will not tolerate. So the reality is that most of our retail brands that do not manufacture their own products do no product curation, have no exclusive ranges, have no differentiation between themselves and any other aggregator retailer selling the same products. We've all got access to the same data nowadays. Amazon most likely also sells that product. eBay most likely also sells that product. And if not, one of their third-party retailers on the platform will. So the reality is that what we're seeing today is that owned properties, so in other words, a business's e-commerce direct website is starting to slowly decrease in significance as a place to transact, because that's not, if I want to shop at effectively an online supermarket, and I want to be able to buy all the things that I buy online in one place, in one transaction, I can't do that if I go to typically a straight e-commerce website, because that's going to have a limited range of products. Whereas if I go to an Amazon, or I go to an eBay, or I go to a Trade Me, or I go to Catch, or I go to Creme, or I go to the market. I can buy from many different retailers, including the marketplace themselves, in the case of Amazon, all in one place, one aggregated cart, one payment. The marketplace then splits out the payments to the merchants that sold those goods on the platform. So the marketplace model, which already dominates in places like China and in other countries around the world, the marketplace model is slowly starting to displace direct e-commerce sales. Now, the downside of that for merchants is the fact that it reduces the brand game to being almost irrelevant unless you're a manufacturer brand, and that's the people that want to buy. That's what people want to buy. People want to buy a pair of Nikes. They don't want to buy from Athlete's Foot. If they could buy directly from Nike, they would. In most cases, it's harder to buy from Nike unless you go into a Nike store, unless you want to buy from Nike online. But the reality is that even Nike has pulled all their products and they've removed their Amazon store because Amazon was taking too big of a cut. And so they will sell through other marketplaces still. And this only happened a few months ago. But they want to have an absolute direct-to-commerce play, omni-channel direct-to-commerce play. And ultimately, it remains to be seen whether shoe stores can compete with that. Shoe retailers can compete with that. And that is the model that every single vertical of products is going through. That's the transition that's happening. It's going to take 10 or 15 years more before that really comes to fruition. But, the dominant brands, the dominant manufacturer brands that have a D2C model, those are the ones that are going to come out to be winners in the long term. And everyone else is pretty much fucked.
Yeah. Just for our students, D2C, we're referring to direct to consumer. So I think, we teach you guys about B2B and B2C and D2C, which is direct to consumer. Couple of things in there that I heard on one of your podcasts that you sort of touched on there, which I love the concept of, and it's not new, but I just love the way that you explain that sort of contextual commerce, the fact that you are fishing where the fish are, so this includes social commerce. So I'd love for you to talk a bit about social media and sort of the role that that's playing. Facebook just announced their new play in that space. Just sort of social and I mean, I guess, when you're talking about a brand like Nike, for example, I would assume there'd be heaps of opportunity for them across kind of social and contextual commerce to be able to get that market share.
Yeah, I mean, it's the great thing about being a D2C brand like that is that you can now, and this has really only been possible in the last couple of years in a genuine, relatively easy to set up way. Social commerce is becoming the norm. There's still some friction in social commerce that there isn't when someone comes directly to your website to purchase. The integration between the catalog of your products and the social platform in question and the way that you surface those through a post or through an image or through a video or through live, that's still a little bit clunky, but that's true only of the West. That's not true in Asia. In Asia, it is absolutely completely seamless. WeChat absolutely dominates in space. They provide their own digital wallet, their own payments infrastructure, mobile payments via QR code. So and also they provide their own biometrics engine and everything else for customer identification and all that stuff. So Asia is literally kicking our ass when it comes to contextual commerce, biometric authentication, and removing Asians and I can talk about this. My partner is half Chinese, half Vietnamese, but I work, the founder of Moustache is Chinese, and I work with Chinese developers every day. So I'm very, very familiar with the Asian expectation around commerce execution. And most Asians will not go to an e-commerce website to make a purchase. There's too much friction. It's too much of a fucking hassle, right? And so they're getting redirected out of whatever they were doing at the time, scrolling through their WeChat feed, for example. It fucks them off if they have to go somewhere else to execute the transaction. They want to do it all right there, right then, click a button. They want their delivery details stored by whatever platform they're on. They want their payment details stored in whatever platform they're on. They want their authentication details and stored in whatever platform they happen to be on at the time. And they want to be able to just hit a single button and have that shit turn up at their door. That is the expectation in Asia. And in fact, the expectation goes far beyond that to a case of replenishment and auto replenishment of consumable goods to where the shit just turns up at your door. So, you know, when you're running out. So Asia is just whooping our ass from a new retail perspective. But even in the West, that level of friction that currently exists in contextual commerce, like social media platforms, we're rapidly trying to rip out friction out of those channels. And you rightly point out that in the last couple of weeks, Facebook has announced their new Facebook Shops integration. So Facebook has had the possibility for you to integrate your catalog from your e-commerce website into Facebook or Instagram. They've had that for quite some time, but it's still been pretty clunky. It's still been pretty painful. And the shopper experience on the front end is still pretty shit. So with Facebook Shops, they are looking to alleviate even more of that friction. And I believe they'll ultimately result in the trend. I believe that Facebook will ultimately release its own wallet. It will release its own payment gateway so that they can clip the ticket on the actual transactional part. Because at the moment, even though I can connect, let's say I'm on Shopify or on BigCommerce with my catalog and I got a website and I can connect that catalog to Facebook or Instagram, and I can start creating hotspots on my posts and basically shoppable links on my paid posts. You still have to you still have to leave the platform to execute the final part of the transaction on the e-commerce website that sent the feed or the post to Instagram or Facebook. So I believe we're ultimately going to get away from that, and that transaction will complete. In Facebook Shops, they're already saying, and BigCommerce and Shopify have already announced that the transaction, even though the cart function and the checkout functions will be provided by Shopify or BigCommerce, those cart functions will be embedded in Instagram and Facebook. So although you're technically transacting on the e-commerce website, that transaction will actually complete in the social platform that you happen to be on at that time. So that's one more chunk that's going to be removed from the friction aspect of things. Shopify and BigCommerce both offer tokenization. And when I talk about tokenization, that is the ability to store your credit card details in their platform so you don't have to put them in every time. So it's credit card vaulting is what it's called. And so that's another piece of friction that will be removed so that you don't have to put in your payment details every single time. And those will be exposed through the social platforms as part of the transaction process. So look, there's a lot of stuff coming. We're not there yet. There still is too much friction. But when we talk about contextual commerce, it's about being able to execute the entire life cycle, right from communications to marketing to branding to pure sales, i.e. pay-per-click type marketing, adding to cart, checking out, all right there in one experience, all on the platform you're on at that point. That is what contextual commerce is, including down to the point of omnichannel, whereby if I bought through your Facebook store or your Instagram profile, then if I want to execute a return of a product, then I would be able to do that through that profile without having to go to your website to execute a return or send you an email. So when we talk about seamless omnichannel, it talks about the entire process, right from customer acquisition to conversion to transacting to reverse logistics and everything in between, loyalty, all of that bundled, personalization, all of that in the platform on which you're on at that time. And that's got some way to go, but that's the grand vision, and we'll eventually get there. It's just going to take a bit of time.
Yeah, and I think for our guys too, you know, who are looking at sort of their own businesses or are looking at, you know, working with clients, I think remembering that customer journey that we teach you guys about, you know, from awareness through to, you know, buying and using and loyalty and becoming advocates, you know, following that path through the customer journey and looking at all the different touch points. You know, we talk about that in subject 1, you know, making sure that at every touch point, you know, you're being kind of loyal to the brand. You're also alleviating any kind of friction or like, you know, the less hoops that your customer has to jump through to get to sort of that final destination, the better. I know personally myself, you know, and you guys have probably seen it, you know, you're on Instagram and you see an, you know, an ad for something and you click through and for me, it's mostly clothing. I'll see something and I'll click off and a little pop-up will come up and I'll start looking through some of the options. And you could be looking through something and click onto a product and then click back and then you lose it. And then you get sent back to Instagram and then you're like, but that wasn't what I was looking at. And it is, like you say, very clunky. And by the time you've kind of gotten to sort of what you wanted to look at, and then you're like, oh, now it's going to take me to the website. And now I've got to put in my details, and you're sort of like, ugh, it's too hard. So yeah, that's yeah, absolutely true. I just wanted you to talk a little bit about, before we open up to questions, let me get this right. What you talk about, phygital experiences. I love this word, and I want you to tell our guys a little bit more about that, and maybe talk about that example we talked about earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. So phygital experiences is really just finding and identifying and executing on every way to fuse digital experiences into the physical environment and vice versa. So really trying to figure out ways in which you can take your digital assets and your digital capabilities and adding them onto a physical experience, and making because ultimately at the end of the day, regardless of whether a customer originates in a physical store or they originate online, you want to recognize them as the same human being. And you want to track their behavior across all of your physical and digital channels. And you want, for example, for them to be able to, for example, add a bunch of stuff to their cart online and then go into store and then pause. And when they open up your account at the pause, all those products that were sitting in your cart but you hadn't yet purchased yet are available there, so that they can see them and they can go and grab them for you. They can direct you to them. They can have a conversation with you about the products, and then they can execute the transaction. On the flip side of that, click and collect is a classic instance of phygital experiences. So you're purchasing online, you're paying online, you're able to select the store that you want to click from, because we now have a connection and a data sharing between the stock and inventory that happens to be in each of our stores that's surfaced through the website. Through systems integration and other customizations of the front end experience, depending on the platform you're on. And that's a classic instance of a phygital experience, or buying online and returning in store, and your account being the same account and you as the same human, and all of your transaction history in the point of sale system as well as in the online platform. And then you take that a few steps further. So that's just the bare minimum level of entry to phygital and omni-channel experiences, because what we want is things like store credits to be available in store and online. We want things like your loyalty balances to be available in store and online. We want your shopping history to be available in store and online. We want you to be able to have QR code swing tags in store, so that I don't actually have to find someone to find something out about this, because the little placards of information in store typically have very limited information around a product, or none at all, apart from a price. And if I wanted to add something to my cart while I was in store because I really liked it, but I saw a queue of 15 people waiting to check out in the store, but I really like that fucking product and I want to add it to my cart in store, and then I'll execute that either on my phone, or once I get home, I reopen the website and open up the cart and there's all my goods that I scanned in store. By linking a QR code with a SKU in store and having that swing tag there, and then either through your website on your phone, their website on your phone, or through an app, a dedicated app for that brand, you can scan the QR code or you can scan the barcode, have that product's page on their website or in the app open up immediately. It'll give you a whole lot more information, interactive information, images, videos, a whole bunch of stuff, content, all that stuff. I can add it to my cart right there. I can check out right there, or I can execute it later on. That furniture brand that has retail showrooms and stores, and they do a very, very good job of fusing that phygital and digital experience. They've got the swing tags with the QR codes. They have.
Sorry, you just froze for a second there. Can you just say the brand again?
Sorry, Brosa, Brosa, which is an Australian furniture retailer And they've got a full omni-channel experience. They've got a website plus retail stores, but they have, the QR code swing tags. They've got, if you go to their website, you can book a virtual tour, you can book a virtual consult, they've got live chat. You can do all those kind of digitally assisted buying experiences online and in store. You obviously can add products that you see in store and that you like to your cart on your phone. They provide a pretty comprehensive suite of digital experiences, but they're one of the few. There's the vast majority, and when we open this to Q&A, it's going to be very interesting to get everybody's opinion on most retail experiences, because I think most of them are fucking shit, frankly. I think the vast majority, we've not moved past the dark ages of retail experiences. You walk in, it's basically four walls with some product shelving or some hangers with some products on it, and someone that's paid minimum wage to take an order from you at the counter. That pretty much is the retail experience. It's not 100% the retail experience, but it is by far the majority of retail experiences. And I think they're fucking atrocious. So, self-checkout is starting to come. Click and collect lockers are starting to come. There's lots of stuff that's just starting to seep in. But when we have brands like Bunnings, who are the 800-pound fucking gorilla in this part of the world, and they have one of the most shit digital experiences you can possibly imagine, to the point where they have no deliver-to-door e-commerce experience at all. It's a fucking embarrassment for this part of the world, frankly, and I'm working really, really hard to change that one business at a time.
I love it. I love your passion. It's great. Brendan's applauding you as well. I think it's also really interesting, just that whole, looking at your retail space as a kind of a brand engagement channel. I think you've said before, where Temple and Webster, for example, I think I wasn't aware of this brochure, but I did, we were just chatting before we all came on, but I had just previously bought a couch and I didn't even know about this brand. But Temple and Webster, definitely, I love the idea that you can, here in Melbourne, you can go into their showroom and you can sit on the couch and you can have a look at, how's that going to look, and is it comfortable? Especially buying a couch, you want to make sure it's comfy, all that stuff. So, I loved that experience, and then you can go home and you can sort of pop everything into your, you can look everything up online. And without even knowing it, I kind of do that anyway. When I go to like a store like Zara, for example, I'll go into the store and I'll find something and I'll normally end up taking a photo of it and then trying to find it again later in the online site or in the app. But it's not an easy, like if there was just a code to scan, that would be amazing, because then it would be like, okay, I'm going to scan the code and then I'm going to finish my purchase when I get home, and and I'm going to have a little think about it. Do I really need another blazer?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I'm going to open up the questions now. Let's see, if you've got a question, just let me know in the chat, and just, you don't have to put the question in the chat. Just let me know if you've got one, and then I can open up, I can unmute you so you can have a go. Leroy says QR swing tag setup sounds similar to Shenzhen shopping experience.
Yeah, I haven't shopped in Shenzhen. Embarrassingly, I haven't been to China yet. It's definitely on the bucket list, and it will happen once we can all travel again. But yeah, look, Asia full stop is ahead from a biometrics perspective, and being able to purchase through biometrics, facial recognition, where through WeChat, basically the WeChat wallet is connected to biometric authentication, where you can walk into a store and you can basically buy with your face, where you just walk out. It's similar to Amazon Go, but without actually having to do any payment at all. You don't even have to have your phone on you, so long as you've got a WeChat account and your face image, your selfie basically is associated with your account. They can charge your WeChat account for anything you take out of many stores in China. So the reality is that swing tags are great, but they still introduce friction. And so what we'd ideally like to have is proximity based experiences and also AR driven experiences, so that when a phone, for example, if I'm sitting on something in a store like Brosa, what I actually want to see ultimately is that the product automatically loads up in the app based on proximity, because it knows where my phone, through NFC and near field communications, it knows where I'm at in the store, and with in-store beacons, it should be able to do that dynamically for me without me even having to scan a QR code in store. It should load all those up on the app automatically so I can see, and it should dynamically adapt as I walk around the store. So that I can easily access the information from those products. We're not quite there yet, and even China isn't there yet to that degree. They still use a shitload of QR codes in Asia. But ultimately, that's where we're going to get. We're going to get to a place where these intermediate clunky go away, and you will have an interactive. You might even have a button next to the couch, for example, that communicates with the beacon, which communicates with your app, and you say you might want to add that to your cart. So you'd whack a button next to the couch, and all of a sudden, boom, it's added to the app in your phone based on NFC. So look, there's lots and lots of, and there's hundreds of other experiences I could describe like that are phygital in nature, i.e., I'm in a physical space, but it fuses the entire experience with the digital layer. And Brosa, for example, you can take a photo of your room, like that room that you're in now. You can take that in on your phone. Then you can scan the product, and it can show it as a AR overlay in your room, so you can kind of see how it looks and colors and that kind of stuff. So they are starting down that path, but it's still very, very, very early days for most brands.
Yeah. I love it though. The future. It's exciting and scary. So Brenden has a question. I'm going to put him, I'm going to unmute him now, but he also says, please get a rocket into Bunnings and we'll elect you PM.
Oh man, it's funny because I've been slating Bunnings online for years. I think one of my earliest articles on LinkedIn was about the shitty Bunnings experience. And I think it was titled, Don't Fall into the Bunnings Trap, which is basically resting on your laurels because you're the 800-pound gorilla and you feel like you're unassailable. And so you just don't need to do digital because you've got such a strong physical presence. We've seen that same mentality in the States in the battle between Lowe's and Home Depot. And we've seen that, so Home Depot initiated a program about 5 years ago called One Home Depot. They spent $5.4 billion on their digital and e-commerce capability. Now that's a lot of money. And for the last few years, investors, because they're a public company, a lot of people have complained that digital investment hasn't really paid off for them to the degree that they would expect. But I tell you, over the last 9 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, that investment has paid off in absolute spades. And they had to just wait for the market to come to them, really, because it's a very old school vertical. Lots of old white dudes run it. Lots of old tradies run it. And the reality is that, they're old school and they run their businesses like old school businesses. And it's like a lads gang is really what it is. And you look at West Farmers, largely run by a bunch of old white dudes. And the reality is that old white dudes don't see a reason to change. So unless they die or see the writing on the wall and hire people that are more progressive and forward thinking, these brands are going to continue to suffer. And Lowe's didn't make that kind of investment. Their e-commerce platform was about a decade old. And so they're the number one competitor against Home Depot in the States. And unfortunately, they weren't able to capitalize on COVID as well as Home Depot was, because their fusion of their online and in-store experience, particularly for B2B and tradies, was terrible. And Home Depot's is world-class. And as a result of that, Home Depot was able to continue transacting, particularly with that half of their business that is trade serviced. They've got a B2B portal and everything else for the trade customers. So look, basically there's going to be a two-speed economy that will emerge out of this over the next decade, digitally enabled and not. And the ones that are digitally enabled will just accelerate past the ones that aren't.
That's great. Good to know for us, guys. It means that there's a need for digital marketers. Brenden, your question.
Yeah, I love the presentation around omni-channel commerce and unified commerce. Works really well with WeChat in China because they have their national ID card and they have like very little privacy concerns. That's like they're very locked down with the way they transact all of that. How do you see that working in the Western world where we're constantly bitching about privacy and we want to know about GDPR and what happens with the Privacy Act here in Australia and all that kind of like removing friction then has an impact on removing privacy constraints as well. So how do you see that meshing in our Western world?
People don't give a fuck about privacy. They say they do. They care about convenience and they care about time. And anything that will give them back convenience and time, they'll give up just about anything. And that's been proven through Facebook advertising and even this phone right here, for example, right? It's an iPhone. With the fingerprint ID, Face ID. I remember when the fingerprint-based unlock was first announced. Everybody was up in arms about it, and we're like, no, fuck no, I will disable that on my iPhone. I will never fucking use that. Not a chance in hell I will ever touch a phone that has that. Now, I don't know a single person that doesn't either use Touch ID or Face ID on their phone. It's just, I literally don't know a single person. I mean, I'm sure they exist, but there's almost no one that doesn't do that, right? And we've got one holding up her hand. So that's cool. That's great. But I personally don't think I know anyone that doesn't use one of those options to unlock their phone. So I think people bitch more about privacy than actually having a genuine concern. And I know that most people, including myself, now that the GDPR seems to be the de facto standard that every country is adopting, even though we're not subject to the GDPR and ANZ, unless we're selling into Europe, everybody's still putting up the cookie notices as if we were. And it just annoys the shit out of people. A cookie pop-up, of course I'm going to accept it. I came to that website to shop and browse on that website. I'm going to let them do whatever the fuck they want to me because I want to shop on that website. So I think that politicians do a lot of saber rattling. But at the end of the day, the consumer will decide, and the consumer doesn't give a fuck about privacy.
Nice. I think we've got your position on that. Love it.
And the consumers that do, that's fine. They're going to find it just almost impossible to transact with their favorite stores. It's just going to get harder and harder.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I've never not accepted cookies on a website. I've never not had a pop-up come up and go, oh no, that whole thing I was just about to look at, or like that purchase I was about to make, not going to do it because of the cookies.
Because they're going to cookie me and remarket to me and chase me around.
It's never happened.
I don't care. I'd rather have my marketing be targeted to me anyway.
Exactly. And we talked about this also, guys, I think in the last session about personalization and the fine line between we want it to be personalized because we expect personalization. We expect only to be given, ads served to us that relate to us. But the only way they can do that is by knowing who we are. Angela has a question.
Oh, hi. It was just in relation to the social platforms like Facebook and Instagram having more power if they were to then have all those, a one-stop shop, including checkout, cart and everything. Would the power, how do you, just an opinion, how would the power balance shift? Because people would be then not going to your website. So there would be a downside, do you think? Or how do you see that out?
These platforms have shown no desire yet to be Amazon. So Amazon is a frenemy to the market at best and a ruthless cutthroat competitor at worst. If you sell through Amazon, sure, you might get the transaction, but you don't get the customer data. Amazon does. So the only thing you get is pretty much the name and address of where to ship the goods, right?
Mm,
so
yeah.
You don't get their email address, you don't get anything else. So it's very difficult for you to form a relationship, and it's technically against Amazon's terms to put your direct contact details in anything you send out that you've sold through Amazon. So they want to maintain and own the relationship between you and your customers. They want to be the arbitrator, right?
Yeah.
Facebook wants to take a much more similar route to Google in that they're quite happy to be a middleman clipping the ticket at every stage of the transaction, but your relationship is still with the end customer. So even if, you know, and it's the same with PayPal, right? So if someone checks out on your site or some other site that you've listed your products on and they pay via PayPal, right? You still have access to that customer's details, their email, et cetera, et cetera. So I see Facebook going down that path much more so because they're at heart, they're a marketing company. They are not a retailer. So Amazon is a retailer and they retail in competition to their retailers, their third-party retailers. So, you know, and Amazon will use your data and your customers' data to beat you over the head with it. So they will cherry pick categories that are high volume and high margin, right? They'll look at the sales data flowing through their platform, whether it's their sales or third-party sales. They will look at it across region and weather and demographics and everything. And they'll say, is this category worth going after from a revenue perspective? Because remember, they're not going to go after a category that won't make them literally billions of dollars, because from an earnings perspective, now that they're a public company, it won't move the needle enough if it's a small category. So you will never see Amazon for the foreseeable future. You'll never see them going after small niche categories because it doesn't move the needle enough on revenue. But the big categories, home electronics, the big monster fucking categories that would allow them to turn on $5 billion a year in revenue, they'll go after those categories. So if you play in those categories, you're completely fucked. But when it comes to the social media platforms, at the moment, they've shown a real willingness and desire to work with retailers to provide them tools for marketing and transactional capabilities without eating their lunch and competing with them and selling against them. And you know, even in a walletized environment within the walled garden of Facebook, you would still, in order to fulfill the transaction, the order would still flow to your platform. So the order might be executed completely inside of Instagram or Facebook, but through integration, its native integration with Shopify or BigCommerce, the order ultimately ends up in your order grid in your platform and then flows through your order and warehouse management system to fulfill to the customer, and they become part of your marketing engine and everything else. So look, I think there's always a risk of that. You know, Facebook could change course tomorrow and become a retail competitor if they wanted to. They certainly have the power to do it. But, you know, Google has had that power for many years, and they haven't done it because they're a marketing company. They're not a retailer. So I think we have to distinguish between, you know, Amazon started out as a retailer. That was the genesis of that brand. They have been a retailer since day dot. Whereas Facebook, Instagram, Google, they've been marketing brands from day one.
Okay, thanks.
No worries.
Amazing. Not sure if you guys have any other questions. I had just one thing to sort of end on, which for me, I've kind of been keeping an eye on just as a marketer, is TikTok. And just how brands are using TikTok to connect. I've seen ads, definitely. I've seen some brands try to do campaigns that have backfired. I know that Nivea has they've done a campaign at the moment where they're looking for, it's called the Splash Face Challenge, and they're looking for someone to be in their ad. And it's basically, you need to film yourself, you know, splashing your face with water, which is a very common scene that you would see in a beauty ad. So they set it up with a hashtag, right? So they thought, okay, we're going to set this up with a hashtag. Anyone who has this Nivea Splash Face Challenge can enter. The hashtag is trending at the moment. I think it's number 2. And pretty much every single video is not about the people splashing their face. It's, you know, John doing his dance. It's Kylie in the kitchen. It's, you know, they've basically just jumped on the back of this hashtag. So Nivea has probably gone, oh my God, our hashtag is trending. When you look through, there's probably only about 3 entrants that are actually, you know, for the campaign. So I thought that was interesting in terms of just, you know, looking at how brands are using TikTok for organic campaigns, and also advertising. Do you have any kind of insights?
Yeah, look, I've watched alongside everyone else. I've watched the TikTok phenomenon happen, and it's certainly going down the path, the well-trodden path of other social platforms. So it's aging up very quickly. Where it used to be 12-year-olds on the platform, it's aging up just like Instagram started out as a kids app primarily, just like Facebook started young at university level ages in the States, and then aged up. Snapchat aged up. Every single social platform since the beginning of social media has aged up. So TikTok is and will continue to age up. So it will continue to expand its demographic penetration massively moving forward. Their music catalog is one of the most pervasive in the world, and that gives them a string to their bow that only Facebook can rival. You can see that the catalog of music for Instagram stories, for example, is as good, if not better, than TikTok. And so that actually is one of the most massive moats, really, to other platforms trying to beat them at their own game, is their music catalog and the access to it that's free for creators to leverage and use. TikTok is going down very much a Snapchat-like path in terms of ephemeral content, but it's obviously it's also in a feed type of arrangement, and you still have profiles like Instagram. So it's a real combination of functionality, and obviously it picked up most of its functionality from Musical.ly when it acquired them. So very interesting platform. I think, anyone who isn't already staking out space on that platform today as a brand is missing out. Like Gary Vaynerchuk says, it's you buy beachfront property before it becomes popular, right? And it's cheap. But once everybody wants to move there, once it becomes Malibu, or once it becomes Miami, you're fucked. So, or once it becomes New York, or whatever case may be, you're fucked. So staking out your claim early is really important because the feed algorithm will absolutely change to the point where it will favor advertisers, et cetera, et cetera. So these platforms always change their algorithm and adapt them over time to favor the biggest creators with the biggest plantation on the platform that can draw the most eyeballs, as well as the brands that are going to spend the most. So that's really how these platforms always evolve. So I think TikTok is an amazing platform. I think it's brought a fresh creativity back to social that I haven't seen since Snapchat became popular. And secondarily, we're seeing, I've got a friend, he's an Australian actually, his name is Mike Angel, used to be basically the head of digital for Culture Kings for many years. And he's now moved to Silicon Valley. He's based in San Fran, and he's co-founded a brand called Vox. And they are integrating shoppable TikTok into e-commerce websites. They've built a platform to allow exactly that. So look, I think there's some amazing stuff coming down the pipe in relation to TikTok. But you have to be creative because the level of creativity on that platform is insane. Mm. So, brands like Red Bull, who dominate social media, and have dominated social media since there was a social media, it's very native to their brand, right? So when I saw Red Bull pop up on TikTok, it didn't feel strange. It wasn't like, what the fuck are they doing here? It was like, well, of course they're going to be on TikTok because they dominated Instagram, they dominated Facebook, and they dominated YouTube. Why wouldn't they dominate TikTok? And they spend literally billions of dollars a year on social. So any brand that is not any brand that is authentically social, like them, is going to kill it. A brand that is fake social because they're just jumping on the latest bandwagon of platforms is probably going to be pretty obvious, and it's probably going to be pretty lame and embarrassing. So I think it really comes down to how authentic is a brand on social. And if it's their first foray into social, they're going to get some hard lessons in TikTok land because TikTok is fucking brutal.
Yeah, it is. It is, absolutely. I mean, I have watched quite a few, and I have to say I've spent many a COVID day scrolling through TikTok, and I love it. But I am actually really surprised by like some of the posts and people just getting bullied, like especially the older people who are on there, and the kids just bullying them, telling them to get off because they're too old, which is me.
But then you see some personal brands. There's this one priest somewhere, I can't forget where he is, and he's fucking massive on TikTok. He's got millions of followers, and he does these weird priest dances and some other things. You've got people building personal brands on that platform that they really probably couldn't build anywhere else. Yeah. Even though they might be of the older demographic like us. So you do have some personal brands doing very well on that platform, but man, if you're not authentic, they will crucify you.
Yeah. I think the girl that's got the most followers, Charlie someone.
Yeah.
She's got 52 million followers.
Yeah.
52 million people follow her and watch her do dances all day.
D'Amelio. Yeah.
Yeah. That's all she does. Last question, just from Leroy, and then we're going to let you go. Thank you so much for your time. Leroy says, how long do you think it will take before we have shopping experiences like Asia? Each time I come back from Asia, it's like stepping back in time. We'll end on that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Look, it's going to get better. AWS Cognito. So Amazon has AWS Web Services, which is a suite of hosting and digital infrastructure platforms and services. I've implemented their Cognito single sign-on authentication platform before when I was at HealthPost, actually. And look, they are bringing biometric support to Cognito. And I think that now starts to open up some pretty amazing opportunities for certain retail brands. I think it's going to take a gutsy retail brand to put a sign at their front door saying, we capture images of everyone coming into the store for the purposes of creating a profile for them in our system to make ease of shopping easier, because that's what they'd have to do ultimately at the end of the day. And they could start out softly by saying, only if you've taken a selfie and uploaded it to our app will we then associate your shopping habits with your in-store behavior or something like that. But the brand that can add the most value the quickest whilst doing that is the brand that's going to win. And they're going to make international news media in the West. The first brand to start doing and offering those true phygital experiences like Asia, they're going to stick their neck out on the chopping block in some respects, because they'll be the first to go down a path that is pretty scary in the West in terms of retribution potential by their customers. But they will also, I think it's only going to take one brand to do it before the dam will burst. And then once one brand does it, then, fashion in particular is the biggest Me Too category in the world. I have never seen a category be so Me Too. So, and it's even down to the e-commerce platform space. When you see a few major brands jump onto an e-commerce platform, every Tom, Dick, and Harry fashion brand comes to you and says, hey, how can we get on this platform? Regardless of whether that platform had anything to do with that brand's first brand success or not. It's just a Me Too category. So look, I think it will probably start with fashion somewhere, I think. And the first brand to do it will be a watershed moment, and then the dam will break, and then everybody will be racing to catch up, because the experience that will be built on the backside will be so seamless, so frictionless, so fun, so valuable to the shopper that they'll just it's like PayWave, right? PayWave, when it first came out, was panned. Now, when I go to a retailer, if they don't have PayWave, it annoys the shit out of me because I just think you're too tight to pay the fees for PayWave. You don't give a shit about me and my experience. You're just too tight to pay the PayWave fees. Fucking pay up. It's digital. Let's go. So for me, that's exactly how I see biometrics and some of these other functionalities that will be brought in store by someone first. Eventually it will be an absolute base expectation, and it'll happen in the span of probably 2 years. It'll go from being a novelty to being an absolute base expectation. It happens that fast. I mean, I know that when PayWave came out in New Zealand, it started out as a novelty, and then within 2 years, everybody expected it. So look, I think we have a precedent for this in PayWave and other technologies, and I really see it. The dam will eventually break, and it will be a big, powerful brand that will do it most likely. Maybe a scrappy challenger brand, maybe. But usually the scrappy challenger brands don't want to spend the money for that kind of technical implementation. So it'll most likely be a bigger brand that has nothing left to lose, right? So if you're a brand like Bardot in Australia, right? And let's say hypothetically, before they went under and closed all their physical retail stores and then reopened as a pure play, let's say in the 6 months prior to that, they had nothing left to lose. And they said, we can implement this in store for pretty cheap. We can spend $100,000 or $200,000 or whatever it is, put in the back office technology, and then spend $10,000 a store or something like that to put this in, and just go all out on that digital in-store experience with some smart mirror integration and things like that. You know, it will potentially be a brand that basically has no other choice, and they're going to die anyway. And it's a last ditch attempt to make themselves relevant again. It could start there as well. And I think that when that happens, the dam is gonna burst, and it's gonna happen very quickly.
Yeah, I also see a store like or a retailer like Sephora, you know, so like a makeup brand that is, I mean, going into a store like that, it's almost like an expectation that you want someone to look at your face, do something with my face, and tell me what I need. And there's, you know, they've got two in one. They're like helping you. They're doing a color match or a skin something, and then, you know, I'm getting something back from it. And so the next time I go into the store, I expect the store to know what's my skin tone, what product should I go for, you know, that kind of thing. I wouldn't be freaked out about that. I don't know if,
or Mecca, if Mecca did it,
or so it's just a makeup brand. I think I can see that sort of happening where I wouldn't be offended. I'd be kind of delighted. I'd be like, oh, okay, this will be cool, because, you know, makeup's a hard thing to buy for women, you know, and if you've got something you've got your own little kind of something that's going to tell you this is the color you need, you'll be like, all right, I'll get 4 of those. Good.
Or if it started out with smart mirrors in dressing rooms, and it was like, okay, I don't need to go out and get this different size in this product. I can, as an option, I can click a button for summoning someone. And I can, if I allow them to take a body shot of me and capture some biometric information and allow that to be attached to my profile, then that will activate that functionality. And I can go, okay, I've got a size 8 of this swing tag, which I'm scanning in the dressing room, so that the smart mirror knows what the product is that I want a different size for. And then it will pop up virtually as a head-up display on the mirror, the sizes that are available left in the store and the quantity of each. And then I click the size that I staff person to bring that to my cubicle and say, here you go, without actually having to even request it from somebody. That's where it will start. So people will give up. I don't think people give a fuck about privacy. I genuinely don't. And I think if you've got a 15-year-old girl in a changing room go out or ask her mother to go out and get her a different size, she's going to take it. She's going to, and it may start out with that younger demographic, and it may be grassroots from there, but it's going to happen, and somebody will do it, and it will be a watershed moment, and it will make the news, and it will catapult their brand into the spotlight.
Yeah. Love it. I could talk about this all day. But we have to let you go. So Angela also says the golf shop. Yep. I think any sort of sporting stuff like that where they can kind of come in and, you know, look at sort of you as a sportsman or what your expertise is, and they understand kind of the special things that you need. I think any of those things. Or
you create your profile online with your size. You enter your sizes, your bust size, your height, your weight, your waist, your inseam, you know, and to that golf thing, you know, your club length, all that stuff. When you create your profile, if you store that information in the profile, and then I recognize you when I come in the store, I'm not just randomly proposing shit to you that's irrelevant to you. I can now recommend things based on that profile property information that you may have only ever entered online, but it's linked to my in-store experience now in ways that are going to make my in-store experience much richer and much more enjoyable. And you're not going to treat me like some random stranger when I walk in the door. So I think that's going to be a huge deal.
Yeah. Great. Love it. Thank you so much, Jason. That was so good. I got a lot out of that, and it's so good to just have a chat with someone who's out there doing it. Your podcast is called At the Coalface, which I love because you are at the coalface, and have a listen to it, guys. It honestly sounds like you just having a chat with a friend on the phone who's just giving you your thoughts about different topics. So they're really snackable, easy to listen to. And there's a whole bunch of topics. Where can our students connect with you? What's the best platform?
The platform that I spend the most time on is LinkedIn. I'm pretty much everywhere, but I post every single day to LinkedIn, at least once a day. Sometimes more than once a day. I do LinkedIn video and articles and straight long form posts. And I try to give commentary on the latest trends in the industry to LinkedIn every single day. So for me, it's been my most successful social platform by far. It's catapulted my career in terms of visibility. It's single-handedly, as a social platform, made me more visible than I've ever been.
Amazing. We might have to get you back to do a LinkedIn session.
Love it. Yeah, sure. Anytime.
Sabrina also agrees that it would be amazing for an online store to create a digital body according to your measurements to show how the clothes would appear on your body type. Yes, I think all women would love that. Thank you, Sabrina. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Jason. And I did record this session. So I know we don't usually record these sessions because we want you guys to turn up and they're supposed to be live. But I have recorded this one. I will also put any links and stuff that we've talked about. I'll send that in the announcement. And thank you again, Jason. I loved it.
Cool. No, it was a lot of fun. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate your time. You guys have a good rest of your Friday. And I'd love to do it again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye all. See you.